I'm kind of stunned at the fact that there aren't more people on BookTube and YouTube in general who haven't done this tag, considering the intersections of games and books and things like that. But, well, we shall see how this goes. I'm really excited to be able to do this tag video. Especially since it intersects two of my favorite topics in terms of things, games with specific to a particular franchise, as well as books. So let's go ahead and get into it. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be another book tag, and it's been a little bit since I've done a book tag video for the channel, but this is one that I'm really excited to do because it's Final Fantasy related. In a string of videos in terms of things that I'm creating for the channel, I'm doing Final Fantasy related themed videos to kind of commemorate me finishing Final Fantasy 16 recently, which you can watch the non-spoiler review on my channel as linked in the cards above and the description down below. But this Final Fantasy book tag is the original book tag. It was originally done by Travis Reed's Books. And I was very surprised that I didn't see more people tagging this particular book tag, because it's not only just a really interesting one in terms of the topics and the questions, but also just really like a nice little ode to each of the characters for Final Fantasy from different games. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. This is not going to be a very long video, but I do want to kind of like go through each of these different questions, kind of highlight the characters that are highlighted in each question, tell you what game they're from if you're not familiar with them as a Final Fantasy fan. And to also preface this, anybody can do this particular book tag, whether you're a Final Fantasy fan or not. You may not know the lore behind some of the characters that are mentioned in here, but each of the questions are uniquely tailored to each of the characters that are in here, which I thought was a very nice touch from Travis Reed's books. So let's go ahead and dive in. So question number 1, Vincent Valentine. Vincent Valentine is one of the secondary characters, which isn't the main protagonist, but one of the main primary characters in the party for Final Fantasy VII, and he is a very popular character in terms of things, and I kind of understand why this particular question is tied to him. So this question is for Vincent Valentine. Name a secondary character that stole the show from the main character in a book. And this one I had to think quite a bit on in terms of things. I'm going to say this mention as kind of a critical point in terms of reading this book. I thought the book was fine. I had some, some issues with it in terms of stuff, but there were people who actually really liked this book. So I'm going to cite The Taking of Jake Livingston, and I think the character that I want to mention from this particular book is Sawyer. And the reason why I say that Sawyer kind of stole the show in this particular YA horror novel is because of the fact that it is a possession novel. And if you learn of Sawyer's role in The Taking of Jake Livingston, he is a ghost, a very vengeful ghost who ends up invading a lot of Jake's life and providing menacing threats and other things through the course of the novel. I was of two minds of this particular character, because on one hand I understood why so much attention was brought to Sawyer, even though he is the perpetrator of a school shooting who is deceased, and his vengefulness is vengeful story is intertwined with Jake's throughout the course of the novel. I kind of felt like Sawyer's role in the novel kind of overtook Jake's a little bit in terms of things. And that was kind of one of the main complaints I had about the book. I really wanted to see more narrative focus be on Jake specifically, but I understood why the narrative choice was done with respect to focusing on both Jake and Sawyer through the narrative of the story, because it is a possession story and it is a YA horror. But I kind of just wish that since it is called The Taking of Jake Livingston, it kind of felt like sometimes Jake's perspective was a little bit sidelined in comparison to Sawyer's story with respect to how that story was presented in terms of the thing. So for the first question, in terms of a secondary character that stole the show from the main character in a book in some ways, I would say Sawyer from The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. Question number 2, Squall Leonhart. Squall Leonhart is one of the main characters from the game Final Fantasy VIII. Also, one of the first couple of Final Fantasy games that I played, and also kind of my first Final Fantasy crush, if I'm being honest. So, Squall is an interesting character, kind of like a bit of an introvert when you first meet him through the game. In terms of things, he is able to wield a gunblade, and he is one of the students participating in the Seed Academy at Belong Garden in the spectrum of the game. And if you know, I think this question is intentionally citing kind of a aspect of his personality that a lot of people pick up on in terms of Squall, whatever iteration he's in, whether it's the original Final Fantasy VIII game, whether it's in his iteration in Kingdom Hearts as Leon, among other things. I think this is definitely tailored to his personality.
I got brought here again? I can't believe this. And what's with that girl following me? Do I have to deal with her? Fine, let's see what she wants. What?
So the question is, name your favorite dark brooding anti-hero. So I would say for my answer for this particular question would be a recent read that I had that is squarely in horror that actually did a really, really good job of establishing this particular character from the main character from the Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. Because I think in terms of the scheme of events, you meet a main character in what is his role as kind of like a common thief that steals a very particular artifacts, precious artifacts in terms of the way of magic, and he ends up stealing the wrong thing and getting the wrong kind of attention, and ends up in a number of different situations that ultimately come to a head as the progression of the story comes through. I'm not going to spoil it for details, but I thought it was an excellently done novella, and I'm definitely looking forward to the follow-up that the author is planning to write as soon as it releases. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I was able to have a chance to read it. Question number 3. Vivi, who is the adorable little black mage from Final Fantasy IX. I really adore Vivi in so many ways, and this question makes a lot of sense. So, name your favorite magician, mage, or magic user. And this was a very quick pick for me. From this very popular middle grade series, I fell in love with it from the first time that I picked it up. Definitely Amari from Amari and the Night Brothers. I enjoyed following Amari so much in terms of her journey wielding magic and trying to prove herself in terms of the first book, which is Amari and the Night Brothers. The follow-up is called Amari and the Great Game. I've read a little bit of Amari and the Great Game, but I have not finished it quite yet. So I'm definitely looking forward to finishing it and continuing my journey in terms of following Amari. But this is a wonderfully delightful middle grade series. Question number 4, Zidane Tribal, or in some circles, I believe it's pronounced Zidane, but I remember playing Final Fantasy IX when I was younger and pronouncing it Zidane, so we'll keep with that pronunciation for the spectrum of this video. Zidane is a really charming protagonist that's really different from a lot of the Final Fantasy heroes that you follow. Very playful, very funny, very carefree in terms of things, and you can tell that he's half human and has kind of like a little monkey tail like on the back of him in terms of things when you're following him.
It has been too long, my friend. Likewise. Zidane!
Let me guess, you're headed that way. Think I'll tag along.
Sure.
So this question definitely made a lot of sense. So for Zidane Tribal's question, name your favorite character with a tail. So I would say this is reaching back a little bit in terms of YA titles that I have read in the past, and it's been a little while since I picked it up, but I absolutely adore this book. This is the first book that I read from Hannah Moskowitz many years ago. This is from the main character Teeth from the same novel of the same name, Teeth. And Teeth is probably one of the ugliest fish boys that you'll ever see, and I say that affectionately because that's how he's described. When we meet Teeth, he's seen through the eyes of Rudy, who is going through a lot of different transitions and things in life, in terms of things. And when Rudy comes across Teeth, Teeth makes an impression from point one in terms of dropping F-bombs and saying whatever for a lot of things that he doesn't understand, and not being very happy that humans are eating up some of his fish buddies and things like that. And you just really get to feel the camaraderie between Rudy and Teeth as this novel goes on. I adore this novel so much. I definitely even want to pick it up to reread because it's been several years since I have, but this pick came immediately to my mind when I saw this favorite. I love mermaids, mermen, and different creatures of the sea in terms of things, so it made sense for me to choose Teeth, or Fish Boy, as he's affectionately called through the novel, in terms of things. So that's my answer for that. Highly recommend. Question number 5, Cyan Garamonde, and I think it's actually might be pronounced Cyan Garamonde. This is a character from Final Fantasy VI, which is one of my favorite Final Fantasies. But question number 5, name a character that has overcome a traumatic experience to become a hero. This one, I could name so many different characters in terms of things because I'm drawn to stories that have heroes and heroines who go through a lot of emotional turmoil to get to a place where their character grows or gets into a place that their actions may not necessarily be heroic, or they may not necessarily be deemed as a hero, but at least being able to see a character grow and change over the course of a story is always something that gives me fulfillment. The very first story that I thought of when I saw this particular question was Armor, which is by John Steakley. And I've mentioned this recommendation on the channel before in terms of talking about sci-fi and fantasy that had an impact on me. A lot of people compare this particular novel to Starship Troopers in terms of things, but I think Armor kind of stands on its own for the way that it chooses to focus its military sci-fi elements while examining closely psychological trauma. And so I would name the protagonist of Armor Felix, or at least one of the protagonists of Armor, Felix, to be a person who goes through a lot of emotional turmoil to ultimately have some heroic actions in terms of the course of the story. Now, this is not to say that he's necessarily a hero, but his actions are commendable as he tries to do everything that he can to destroy the ants that are plaguing the planet in his particular missions and dives. You meet him as being one of the sole survivors of a particular mission that goes horribly bad, in terms of start of things, and he is emotionally devastated. He's really going through it in terms of the novel, and you see him try to kind of weigh that trauma throughout these different turns in the spectrum of the novel as things go forward, while also examining in terms of the impact of war and how it has on his psyche, and also with the suit that is bound to him in terms of things, in terms of the powers that he gains with this particular suit that he has. You can tell how it changes him and molds him, and he has to kind of deal with that influence in terms of having this power and having this kind of like and trying to like deal with the turmoil that it takes him through. But I thought it was a great novel in terms of what it chose to do in terms of things. Very terrifying. It's right up like, you know, like what I would expect in a military sci-fi focus to be in terms of things. But Felix was the first. Felix from Armor by John Steakley was the first character that I picked for this particular question. Question number 6, Fran. Fran is a character from the game Final Fantasy XII, and I adore her so much. Balthier and Fran were both two of my favorite characters from Final Fantasy XII, and I love that. I loved the game at the time that I played it. I played through the original Final Fantasy XII title. I am working my way through the Zodiac Age version of the game as I'm basically filming this in terms of things, and I really enjoy it, revisiting some of the locations in Ivalice, and also just exploring the kind of reconnecting with each of the characters that I meet through here. But yeah, Balthier and Fran are two of my favorite characters from that game. So it makes sense that this particular question is tied to this particular character. So it's name your favorite archer. I could name several different archers from different books and from different categories and age groups and things like that. I think I'm gonna stick with manga basically for this question, and it's probably cheating a little bit because it's manga based on a movie, but my first pick for this was Ashitaka from Princess Mononoke, just because of his prowess with a bow in terms of things, and he was the very first character that I thought about when I thought about favorite characters with a bow in terms of this question. I could have named several different characters for this question. You know, Yona from Yona and the Dawn, though I have not made it through all of the series for Yona of the Dawn, she is also a great character to follow. I could have named Rei from Sailor Moon, who commands a fire bow arrow as well. I could have named Ishida from Bleach as part of this particular question, but I think I'm going to stick with Ashitaka just because that was one of the characters, one of the archers that I kind of fell in love with when I was getting into anime, and knowing that from Studio Ghibli's work in terms of things, that movie has stayed with me, and the manga adaptation has stayed with me as well. Next question is from a character that is from one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, as well as one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters, Terra Branford. Terra is such a layered female protagonist in the Final Fantasy series, and her backstory has her going through it for a lot of different things. And I loved Final Fantasy VI for so many of the different characters and their backstories and things like that. It's been a little while since I've played it, and I'm definitely looking forward to diving back into it again. But for this respective question, I am not surprised as to why it focuses this particular question on her character. And I don't really want to go too much into it because it does involve spoilers for the game, but the question is, name a character whose lineage is not 100% human. And the very first recommendation, the very first name that popped up into my head in terms of books that I have read was Jarrett from the Trickster trilogy by Eden Robinson. And I adored following Jarrett's journey so much. This is a First Nations author from Canada who has written about Jarrett's journey, which follows him as a teenager, basically navigating life while taking care of his single mother who is an alcoholic, and also trying to survive school and other pressures around him in terms of things when you first meet him in the first novel, which is the son of the trickster. And Son of the Trickster kind of starts off with Jarrett, like, you know, navigating all these different hardships and things like that. And then he ends up meeting some very interesting figures that kind of tell him of his fate and his destiny, and navigating a particular change that kind of shows that he's not 100% human. He is basically the inheritor of the trickster, and he has to navigate a lot of these changes that happen to him, physical, emotional, and just a lot of different things in the course of the story that have to do with magic and perilous events that cause Jared to be in the crosshairs of a lot of different things that are going on, especially with respect to the legacy of his father, who he doesn't really know, and comes to figure out why in the course of the series. So I loved following Jared through all 3 books. This is definitely a series that I will recommend to anyone who comes across my channel or is looking for a very solid YA series in terms of First Nations and Native YA literature. Definitely would recommend, and definitely a fine pick for this particular question. Question number 8, Mog the Moogle. Mog the Moogle is a very familiar face across many Final Fantasy games. There are Moogles in a lot of different turns. I'm guessing that this may be referencing Mog the Moogle from Final Fantasy IX, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to kind of go with that in terms of things. And considering Mog is kind of a very helpful sidekick, very helpful in terms of finding save points across Final Fantasy IX, in terms of where Mog shows up, it makes sense that this is the question associated with him. So name your favorite sidekick from a book or series. This may be just very straightforward, easy answer to maybe an answer that many people would give for this particular question, but I'm going to name Samwise Gamgee from the Lord of the Rings trilogy as my favorite sidekick. He is the quintessential best friend, helping Frodo through the aspects of his journey, and I adored following like the hobbits in general for the Lord of the Rings, but especially like my heart kind of set on Samwise, just because of how great of a character he is, and I really enjoyed following him, reading him through the books as well as the movies. And I would like to reread the Lord of the Rings at some point in time for just to be able to re-experience the series itself, but Samwise is definitely my pick. Question number 9, Kain Highwind. Kain is a very complex character in the realm of Final Fantasy IV, and if you know anything about Kain's backstory, it is definitely one that is not without trauma and a lot of different things in terms of his turns from, being an ally to an enemy, and kind of like that fine line between the two in terms of the things that he does and what happens in the game. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers about what happens, but this is just kind of giving you an overview of what his character is like to lead into this question. So this question is, name a character whose jealousy led them down a dark path. And so for this question, I had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out, okay, who do I want to showcase in terms of a character from a book that I have read? And I'm guessing in terms of, this can be any different genre in terms of things like, for things. So I chose Violet from The Push. And if you know the premise of The Push, this is basically exploring the relationship of a mother who, Violet is not the main character of this book. You could argue she serves a very different role in this particular book in terms of things, but this follows a mother who has a bit of a postpartum depression when she births her first child, who is her daughter Violet, but yet birthing her second child becomes more used to the idea of becoming a mother, and you can kind of see how Violet is not exactly happy with the in terms of things with the birth of her baby brother. And I'm not going to spoil anything with respect to the push, but if you have seen my video in terms of my favorites, my all-time favorite books and influences and things like that, you can kind of tell from the comparisons in terms of things of what this story does with Violet's character and why it can be really scary to have like, you know, kids being in kind of horrifying situations in terms of things. But my answer in terms of the jealousy aspect, in terms of leading them down a dark path, was Violet from The Push by Audrey. And last question here. Cloud Strife, the main protagonist for Final Fantasy VII, which was the very first Final Fantasy that I played. And it does not surprise me that this particular question was paired with this particular character.
What are you, 20-something?
First.
Huh?
Soldier first class. Doesn't go into the 20s.
What the hell you talking about? I mean your age, not your damn rank.
You failed the test.
What test?
Driving.
I'm great at driving.
Great at scaring your passengers, more like.
Not used to having any.
Maybe you should just let me drive.
Nope.
So name a character with a prickly exterior but has a heart of gold. So I'm gonna name something a little bit different, like than one would expect for this particular question. I would say, in terms of a character with a prickly exterior, in terms of how he's presented in this novel, and then you learning later on how much of a heart of gold he has and affection for the main female character, I would say Ventura Escada from Silver Shark, which is part of the Kinsman universe by Ilona Andrews. And just seeing how he's a ruthless leader who is very much a go-getter, gets what he wants when he wants in terms of things, and does not show mercy to people who he deems his enemy. He's a formidable foe, which places Claire, who is the main female protagonist, in kind of a bind, since she is kind of an exiled person who has been a part of the lost ongoing battle of the war that occurs in the Kinsman universe and in this particular story. And she's trying to hide her identity from Ventura as she's working for his company and under his direct supervision in terms of things. And she's also trying to be a part of a separate operation, which in turn involves helping people under the radar, which she has to mask her identity and also mask it from Ventura, who doesn't know her true identity in terms of things. You would think that this would be a story that would be a lot more contentious than you would think, but it does the tension between them as well as their respective affections for each other very well in the course of the story, without going into too many spoilers. But I really enjoyed that story. That was one of my favorite stories within the compilation of the Kinsman universe. So definitely have no hesitations in terms of choosing Ventura Escada from Silver Shark, which is part of the Kinsman universe by Ilona Andrews. So that is it for this Final Fantasy book tag. So I think I'm gonna be bold with this one and choose some very specific people to tag as a part of this. As I mentioned before, you don't have to know anything about Final Fantasy to do this particular book. That tag is just naming books that have to do with the respective characters and the respective questions that follow them. So first up, in terms of things, Frodo, since you have tagged me in so many book tag videos, I'm going to tag you in this one. Frodo is a wonderful creator who I have followed for quite some time on the channel, who was a part of welcoming me to BookTube in terms of the videos that I make, so definitely tagging him. And give him a follow and a like it if you're so inclined. He's just a wonderful person to follow. Let's see, who else do I want to tag? Let's see. In terms of the people who I would think would do really well with this tag, even if they may not necessarily be familiar with a lot of the Final Fantasy franchise, let's see. I'm going to tag Bree Titian in terms of things, because Bree has been a creator that I followed for quite some time. Not long, like I've watched a lot of her videos starting out basically since Bree reads a lot of manga, a lot of different mix of titles in terms of things. I think she would be a wonderful pick for this particular tag in terms of picking unique stories that could fit each of the questions that are on here. Another booktuber that I'm going to tag also is Ashley, but specifically for the realm of comics. And for this, since Ashley reads a lot of manga and a lot of comics, I think she would have a wonderful perspective to have for this particular tag in terms of recommendations and things like that for each of the questions that are here. So definitely give her channel a like and subscribe, because she has two book channels, both Bookish Realm as well as Realm of Comics. I think Realm of Comics has a bit less than in terms of follower count for than her main channel, which is Bookish Realm, but I'm always happy to recommend it. And I find her recommendations and her topics and the way that she expounds upon her thoughts in every book she reads to be very inspiring and very thorough in terms of things. So I definitely enjoy watching her videos, and she's definitely one of the creators that kind of inspired me to kind of create my own booktube channel as well, to cite that. Let's see, who else do I want to tag in terms of this? I think I don't think Chris has a lot of followers, and I want to tag Chris into this as well if Chris is interested. Chris is over at Chris's Booking It, I believe is channel name, if I remember correctly. A wonderful creator to follow as well. Let me do two for my last two. So I will do Ray over at Bookmark Chronicles for this particular tag, as well as probably Vina from Miss WOC Reader, because I feel like both Ray and Vina both do a great job on their respective channels in terms of providing a wide range of recommendations in terms of things. And as I mentioned before, in terms of things, this is a general book tag. You can recommend basically anything you want, even if it doesn't have anything to do with Final Fantasy as a franchise or fantasy titles in general. This is kind of like just being able to answer the prompts for these respective prompts. But considering my love for both Final Fantasy as well as my love for books, I thought that this was a perfect tag to do. And this isn't the only Final Fantasy tag that I'm going to do. I am creating a Final Fantasy book tag of my own to kind of encompass questions between ones that are affiliated with the Final Fantasy franchise, as well as some general bookish questions that everybody can enjoy. So it's kind of like that dual asking different questions in that respect, but that'll come in a later video. So I think I'm going to end the video here. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to be informed of when I post new videos. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.